Okay, so maybe I can start already. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bart Dumoulin, as Veerle told you. I'm working for an environmental organization that is called Bon Beter Leefmilieu, where I work on sustainable mobility. But I'm also coordinator of the Flemish Green Deal on sustainable city logistics, where we have some 45, mostly companies and a few cities who are engaged in specific actions to make the city logistics within their boundaries, within the region of Flanders, more sustainable. We are going to debate on the future of city logistics and maybe on sustainable city logistics in particular, together with Paul Buys, who is assistant professor on sustainable city logistics at the University of Groningen, the city which we've heard already a few pilot projects before. Secondly, Luc de Schrijver. Luc is General Director of GLS, GLS Belgium, which is one of the big parcel companies in Belgium. And thirdly, we have Michael Gerard, who is coordinator of for the municipality of the city of Ghent, which is the second biggest city in Flanders. And he is responsible for the policy on sustainable city logistics as well. So maybe to start and to kick off for Luc and Michael, if we look at the Flemish ambition, the Flanders region also has the ambition to start sustainable city logistics by 2025. We know the experience from the Netherlands, where they have also 2025, but they started a few years earlier than in Flanders. Is this 2025 ambition realistic? Or what do you think that would be the main obstacles to realize this ambition? Look, if I can start with you.
We can. So, yeah, 2025, yes, it's not far away. That's true. And the solutions, yeah, there is not one solution. The solutions are also depending the profile of the service provider. You have service providers focusing a lot in the 2C market with small parcels. You have other ones who have much larger volumes, like in the B2B, and especially the delivery in shops, where huge volumes are delivered. And until now, the vehicles available on the market were quite limited in size. I think until few years ago, you had this nice Nissan 200 that I know someone has practiced recently. But a few years, I think 4 years ago, the e-Crafter of Volkswagen came to the market with more or less 9 cubic meter. And this is for a company like ours very limitative. We use in general vehicles of 15 cubic meters, so the largest vans that you have on the market. But if we have to move to this kind of vehicle available today, this means that we will need 1.5 at least vehicle to replace one. Mm-hmm. So we cannot speak about really efficiency. But the good news is that some manufacturers, like the Stellantis group and Ford, are coming next year with high volume capacity vehicles. And on top, they will also have a much larger radius than the Nissan or the e-Crafter. So this will be the nice combination. We will have a wide of solution for those for being able to be prepared for 2025. But then, of course, you have the charging infrastructure. Or in general, our depots are running with 150 tools approximately. You can imagine if you have to charge 150 vehicles on the same time. There is today no infrastructure, no electricity infrastructure that can support this. So this is for sure another problem. And personally, and we can discuss this later also, the consolidation, because people can say, okay, 150 vehicles, okay, they just can split it over different micro hubs of city hubs, the name you can give what you want, but on the end, the more you are splitting your process, the more cost you have. So the efficiency is also to go with full vans and get efficiency out of this. So that is for me the most critical part is the charging infrastructure.
Yeah. And do you see evolutions in this as well? You mentioned for the vehicles there is a good evolution. There will be production of adapted vehicles. Do you see solutions in smart charging, high volume electricity, power charging?
Not really.
No.
Not really. The only thing we believe that will be possible is to have the vehicle charged at the driver's home, because then you will split your charging needs in different areas, contrary to consolidate them in one place.
Okay. Michael, from your point of view, City of Ghent, how do you look at this ambition of 2025 zero emission city logistics?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we welcome very much the ambition of starting with zones for zero emission by 2025, aiming to conclude by 2030. At least there has been set a horizon. So that gives clarity both to policy as also to the market. So that's a very good point. There are, of course, challenges. I think cities will have to invest in people and money in order to roll out such a plan. It's not an easy thing. It's a thing that costs money, costs time. And at this time, a mobility plan is mainly focusing at general mobility, but too little today on goods mobility. So we'll have to put more people in order to realize that, both at the city level, but also at the Flemish level. So that's one thing, put people to realize that. The second thing is, the question is whether you start in 2025 or 2030. If you start in 2025, then the technical challenge is even bigger to have, let's say, vans available at a competitive price. But for vans it will work, we assume. For bigger trucks that are also needed in cities, for example, to deliver supermarkets, etc. The question is whether by then, 2025, 2030, technology will be available and companies will have a choice, will not have to drive super expensive pilot trucks. So there, a technological feasibility is definitely a case. I also believe that a zone for zero-emission transport is one of the solutions, one of the, let's say, the triggers or the hurdles or the barriers to have more sustainable transport, but we also still want to keep control of how many trucks come into the city. So those trucks and vans and cargo bikes will be zero emission, but we still have to look at how can we still keep the volume of the number of movements still going down as well. And so a zone has to be part of a plan, also looking at efficiency, not only at output CO2.
And what should be other elements of this plan? If you have the staff and you can develop a plan, what can a local authority do in order to incentivize these sustainable or zero-emission city logistics? Well, we come often to the point of efficiency. So how can we reduce the number of heavy vehicles in the city or vans in the city? I think we have to keep on looking for alternatives. And the session of today is essential. We have to keep on trying to be smarter, to have fuller load of those vans, to have economic case for cargo bikes, because economically, there's been a study in the Netherlands that shows that 10 to 15% of the volumes going into the city can go into the city by cargo bikes at an equal cost of coming into the city by a van. There is just today not 10 or 15% coming into the city by cargo bikes. So we as a city can, for example, try to speed that up by showing it more to the public or by stimulating it, the purchase of cargo bikes. I think that has been done in Mechelen. So experimenting, stimulating,
on top of the regulating role of a city, should be
You think
enhanced
the
as
city
well.
of Ghent will be prepared to develop a subsidy scheme for supporting the sector?
I think so. I think that that's part of the mix of measures that you do, that you apply. It's regulating, it's stimulating, and under stimulating, we could consider that, for example, if we want to have more merchants using cargo bikes, that we could develop that. That's definitely possible.
Look, maybe that's an open door. Do you think a subsidy scheme might be a good idea in order to support the sector in this transition?
I believe that the most of you will think he will say yes. No, I'm not a defender of temporary subsidies. I can understand that startups without financial powers, they like to have some subsidies, and we saw many in Belgium. And when the subsidies were stopped, they disappeared also. So I'm more in favor of sustainable. That's also in this case sustainable solutions. But I like also to mention and face to you that to break down all those shipments, you have the picture today of a large vehicle which is polluting. I think tomorrow there will be vehicles that do not pollute. So that is the good part. But to break down all those shipments into smaller deliveries, you will generate a lot of cargo bikes movement. And I don't know if people today see this picture. And the picture will be many cargo bikes in very narrow streets. And this is also a part of the story that we have to consider. Not just watch to this large vehicle disappearing, but also watch to the dozens of cargo bikes that will maneuver between the pedestrians.
So there's not just one silver bullet solution to make the city logistics more sustainable. About the subsidies, Paul, the Netherlands, I don't know exactly how much money, but the government reserved a lot of money to support the sector in order to make this transition 2025 for zero-emission vehicles in their zones. Do you think subsidies are a good idea?
Well, I think in general it's all about the balance. So in the end, we are ending up at more or less the same time frame when we actually want to start with the zero-emission zones, and we have been working on it for some longer time, right? And in that time, what I've observed is first at very small scale, trying to understand what is the market actually looking like. Even in the discussion here, it's very difficult to sort of pinpoint what actually is urban logistics, right? And when you talk to GLS, obviously parcels come to mind, right? But that's only a tiny fraction of what goes into and out of the city. And so we've been talking a lot in Sjouke and a lot in Groningen with Sjouke and in other places in Amsterdam. And we've been talking with stakeholders to sort of make sense, starting small pilot projects and involving stakeholders. So that's sort of the stimulating policies local governments can take. And at the other end, you also have the stick, right? Where you have the carrot, you have the stick as well. Stick can be time access restriction zones, zero emission zones, etc. When looking ahead now, the Netherlands will have these zero emission zones. They will be rather strict, right? So that means basically this. All of a sudden, there's a stick. In the past, it has mostly been the carrot, stimulating small pilot projects. And what's curious now is where will this new balance end up? So now with the zero emission zone, my anticipation is that a lot of particularly smaller companies will start to struggle entering the city and coming to Sjouke and other municipalities saying, hey, can you keep the city for us accessible? And so I think, answering your question in a long U-turn, right? So subsidies may be needed to support smaller companies who still want to go into the city, but at larger scale, I don't think it's the silver bullet.
We heard from the pilot project that we need a critical mass to make it successful. And in these pilot projects, it didn't seem to be that easy to find a critical mass. Is an obligation by the government a solution for this? A government who says, okay, like you do in the Netherlands, this is the zone, you don't enter with a polluting vehicle and that's it, and you just have to adapt yourself to that. Do you think this is a good idea, the way to go?
It has to be seen. Yeah, so I feel it's a better idea than endlessly keeping to try and start small hubs, etc. So what I like very much about the Surflogh project, and I'm very happy that I could tag along, is that this project has been very open about its learnings, as we've just seen in literally the 3 presentations in the half hour before, right? So usually as an academic you read papers and it's all about you get urban consolidation centers will be sustainable if, and then you get this very nice fairy tale, and then everyone keeps on trying. Yeah, so to me that has been very useful to be a part of.
Yeah, I like to.
I thought you would like to react.
Yeah, I like to react on this. First of all, I agree that I was limiting myself to, let's say, the parcels distribution, and I totally agree with Michael. And I pull that we have, of course, much more than only parcels. And indeed, 2025 for this kind of transport is another topic. But if there is an obligation, there has to be also a solution. And technologically, there are no solutions today. Yeah, very expensive solutions, there are always. But so if there is an obligation, there is a breakdown. And like I say, if there is a breakdown, there will be a lot of movement, etc., etc. But to force a consolidation, you have to understand that the players, they like to differentiate themselves. That's quite normal. This is your service. This is what you aim to provide as services, and you like to differentiate. If you have this way of thinking, why do you just not pull it further on and say, why do we need all these different pans? We should just have one, and one shop instead of 20 selling also pans. So I'm not very happy when I hear you have to consolidate it. It's like a communist approach. And if you have this mind, you should really put it to more than only the transportation.
The question is,
because sustainability is also from where it comes, why so many choices, and so on and so on.
So am I audible?
Yes, I think so.
From the perspective of the parcel delivery companies, I can fully understand what you're saying, right? So, and what you see in many of these urban consolidations centers is that the focus has been very much on this parcel delivery, and then you ask GLS to basically consolidate with UPS and other one-on-one competitors, right? I think there's many other aspects of the market where consolidation may make sense, where you don't have to forge such difficult or even undesirable coalitions, right, from a competition point of view.
Okay.
So it's also why I started my first answer with sort of putting the landscape of all these different flows coming in and out of the city, because it's critical that you make the smart decisions on what you actually target. For example, in The Hague, a city in the Netherlands, right, an urban consolidation center is obliged in public tenders. Right, but then we're not talking about parcels, and not what we're talking about is that the facility goods are consolidated with the printing papers, are consolidated. So that is different suppliers of municipality buildings, and they have to deliver at the urban consolidation center. I wasn't a big fan when I learned about it, but actually it creates a lot of change, and it creates a different mindset from these different suppliers. And so it could be something. When applied to the right segment of city logistics, it could be one of the many tools in the box to make things more sustainable.
Michael, you want to react?
Maybe conclude, the city of Mechelen, city of Ghent, Luc from GRS participated in a project that did a study on where does it make sense to use such a consolidation center. And there it was clear that we should also aim, or maybe mainly aim at those truck rides or van rides coming to the city and delivering just one pallet and doing their tour of Flanders continuously. If we would aim for them, it makes economic sense to drop their pallet or parcels at the city border, and it makes operational sense. And we've done another test with the University of Ghent, where during 6 months we did that, so delivering through a hub, and we noted that those suppliers using that hub who did their ride themselves After 6 months, they changed their mind as well. And that was particularly a company that does a tour of, let's say, East Flanders and did 1 drop in Ghent or 2 drops in Ghent. And so it's a lot of things that you have to do at the same time, and consolidation really works for those rides that have little number of drops, no density in the city. But the question is, how can you find those? How can you target those companies? That's another ballgame.
Consolidation is one kind of cooperation in sustainable cities or in city logistics in general. What could be other ways to cooperate?
Yeah, I think. You hear me? Yeah. So I think one possibility is to have a really open parcel locker network, but a really one. So people will understand what I mean with this. Because why should every player start to negotiate with city to install all their own parcel locker? So it will be a chaos of parcels locker in all the cities. So you should really only authorize the installation of parcel lockers when they are open for all.
A white label parcel locker?
For example. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
This could help us a lot.
Okay. And how about this stakeholder dialogue? Mechelen as well as Groningen are 2 examples of collecting all the people who are engaged in this city logistics to go into dialogue, to see what might be solutions. How do you feel about this? Is that an interesting way to go, or?
I think in the beginning it's a very good way to get to know who's who, right, in the city, which actors are there, what are the issues. But at some point it should go beyond simply doing meeting after meeting and small pilot after small pilot, right? There should be a place in time for really scaling up. And then you can exploit those relationships that you've built up, right? And actually in the stakeholder sessions I attended, it's mostly the market parties who start saying, look, municipality, please take a big step forward, because then we and all our competitors are faced with the same level playing field, and we can make a step. Don't let us sit here being front runners and force this upon all of our competitors. So I think that's very interesting.
As the city of Ghent has also experienced in this stakeholder dialogue, or not yet, or?
Yeah, we've done some in a few years ago when we started up a program to try to develop a consolidation center. We mainly focused our stakeholder sessions around that model. We now feel that there's more to sustainable urban freight than focusing on an urban logistics or an urban consolidation center. There's more to it, and therefore we welcome the Flemish ambition as they have set the horizon. They will organize stakeholder sessions as well, but at least for those present in the room, the vision is set. And now it's a matter of building a plan, public and private all together, on how we will do it. It's not the question anymore whether we will evolve towards zero-emission logistics. Now the question is, how will we evolve? And we'll have again stakeholder meetings, experiments, but it will be a bit more
but at a certain point, it should be, this is the way to go, let's start.
And it's a no-brainer, I think, for parcel logistics that by 2025, it can be zero emission, last mile. But there's a lot of debate and discussion we'll have to have, and looking at construction logistics, waste logistics, etc. And we will be happy to learn also from the Netherlands, because their ambition is 2025, and ours is 2025, 2030. So it's
Now
it's started.
It's all about data. We heard this morning, it's all connected. The companies have a lot of data, of course, to run their business. As a part of the solution, it might be interesting to find a way to share this data, to collect data, to share the data, and see what is the best solution. But I can imagine there are also a lot of obstacles to share this data. Look, how do you look at that? Do you see in short-term possibilities to go further with this data in order to solve the challenge?
Yes, but it depends what really is behind, because sharing data to find out what should be the right way, we did this already. Michael just mentioned the common project we participate into with the Ville and the University of Antwerp, and we have shared data, and those data has helped to understand which is the breaking point where you can use a consolidation point or not. Mm-hmm. And this was a very important exercise. Why? Because during years, cities have thought that this was the solution. And it is not the only solution. It's one of the solutions, like Michael says, depending the profile of the service provider. Mm-hmm. So we are sharing data. If you think about sharing data for other premises, we have to discuss about it, because you have data protection today, you have so many elements which you have to consider. Mm-hmm. But at least to make things moving, I think it's our duty to provide data. Mm-hmm. If we can trust the environment where the data are used, we are pleased to do so, and we do it.
Yeah, even if you are together with other competitors.
There were other competitors present. Yes.
Yeah. Do you have experiences on data sharing, and what should be the necessary conditions to make this work? Because it's sensible, of course, the data from companies.
Yeah. So what I perceive in many projects, also other European projects, is this drive for gathering as much data from private companies as possible, and I think. It's interesting to do a few of these projects as were just suggested, right? And I've been participating in a few of those projects. But what I realize when looking on the European landscape is that many cities don't really know what goes in and out of their city at a large scale, right? And given that you have all these different segments and all these different companies within each individual segment, I think it's elusive to think that you would be able to gather all that privately owned data and do the privacy and the non-disclosures that are needed to give a complete overview of that data. Whereas what you also see now is these automated number plate recognition systems and other kind of smart city censoring, which actually could give you a more high level, yet less detailed view on what goes in and out of a city. How many trucks go in, how many vans go in, how many bikes go in, how long do they stay, etc., etc. So I would advocate for a push to make those kind of data readily available. I think those data are publicly collected, so they should be publicly available to a certain extent, at least the metadata. Right, so that would be my push forward. And of course, it's always nice to do pilot projects and to learn from data where the threshold is. When is a cargo bike more efficient than a diesel van, for example? Sure, we should do that as well. But at a high level, I think we should in Europe make a push to better understand what goes on in our city and also see what, say, a zero emission zone actually does in terms of freight movements.
Mm-hmm. You wanted to react to that?
Yeah, maybe from a municipality point of view, I think we're underusing the availability of ANPR data. We're only using a very limited data set.
Because you're not allowed to.
We're not allowed to. Mm-hmm. So at the short term, we could get much more out of it, even within privacy constraints, at least to monitor how many cars and to monitor the evolution. And type of vehicles, tonnage, combustion engine, etc. That's one thing. A second thing, I personally believe that data and technology is a key element into the solution of more efficient transport. It happens on the long haul, that companies share offer and demand to get full truckload. It does not happen a cooperation yet to my knowledge, much in the last mile. And the question there is, what is the role government versus the private market? What I found interesting in that domain is that in the Netherlands, again, the government has discussed with the private market under which conditions is the private market ready to share data. What is the deal between the public sector and the private sector to share data? For example, if we share all our logistics data, will we get in return better traffic information? If the answer is yes, then I think companies will be able to share in a private way, in a secure way data. So I think we should, next to zones for zero emission, also start a track on how will technology help to get more efficiency in the last mile.
Yeah. Okay. Veerle, do we still have time for some questions from the audience, or I don't know exactly how much time we still have left?
We are over time, but I would leave it up to the audience. Maybe are you still up to questions, or are you up to having a drink now?
No.
Or maybe that's a real difficult choice to make.
If there are no urgent questions, maybe I can. Anyone with a question? Not immediately. Then maybe I can. Yeah, I want to round up a little bit. Some things I learned. One, the city logistics is not just one sector. It's in fact several sectors. Secondly, there are a lot of challenges in part of the vehicles, but there is a progress going on, and the right vehicles will be available within the next couple of years. So that's also a good part of the solution. Consolidation is one solution, but it's not the silver bullet solution. And I think to finish, cooperation is key in this with the local governments, the research institute, but definitely also the companies that are in the sector to cooperate and to make this ambition for 2025 or further on possible, so that we can make the living quality in the cities better, because that's the final goal, I think.
Many, many thanks, Bart, for moderating this debate. Many thanks to our participants, Michael, Luc, Paul, thank you. I have a small gift for you to thank you. It's our special made Mechelen biscuits. And that rounds up our session of this afternoon, but also the session part of this Inspiration Day. So I want to thank everyone that followed the Surflogh sessions this morning or this afternoon, also to the online public. Thank you for being present behind your laptop somewhere here in the world. Keep following us via Twitter, website, whatever. Follow what we're doing in Surflogh. And yeah, let's go and have a drink and meet you soon. Thank you.